I have great news. I've discovered immortality. All you have to do is take this pill and you will live forever. Do you want to take it? You might have some questions. One of them might be, is the pill safe? And the answer is yes, I guarantee that there are no side effects. Another question you might have is, what kind of immortality are we talking about? In Gulliver's Travels, one of the scenes is of these people who are immortal, but they keep biologically aging. So after a little while, they're no longer able to do anything in their lives because although they keep living forever, they're not dying, that their bodies age and break down, so they're no longer able to do anything. That's not the kind of immortality that I'm talking about. In fact, the pill gives you whatever kind of immortality you want. The only thing is that you can never die. If you take the pill, you will live forever. So, do you want to take the pill? Many people think that immortality would be amazing. That, after all, is what the concept of heaven is about. You get to live an amazing life, and it goes on forever. But some philosophers think that immortality wouldn't actually be that good. We're going to dig into that today. A well-known argument against the value of immortality comes from a philosopher named Bernard Williams, who lived in the 20th century. Williams argued that immortality faces a dilemma. This is a dilemma in the technical philosophical sense, that each option results in a bad result. So if option 1 is bad and option 2 is bad, then you shouldn't really want immortality. Sometimes philosophers talk about this as each horn of a dilemma. So you think of a bull with horns, and you either get poked by the first horn or you get poked by the second horn. Either way, getting poked is bad. Let's take a look at the horns. The first horn of the dilemma is boredom. Williams thinks that if you were to live forever, eventually you would just get bored. You would do everything there is to do, and over time you would just run out of interesting things. You can choose as many things as you want, says Williams, but eventually it wouldn't be good to live forever, because if you kept trying different things and you just got bored by them, then life would no longer be interesting, it would be bad, and so you wouldn't want to keep doing it. One possibility that you might think of is that the way to avoid boredom is you could just keep trying different things. So imagine somebody who wants to learn the violin, and so she plays the violin for years and becomes an expert in the violin, and then after a while, like a typical lifetime for us, she gets tired of the violin, and so she switches to a different instrument, the cello. Then she tries the cello for a while. Williams says that if you keep doing different stuff, even if you don't get bored, eventually you're going to become a literal different person. To understand this argument, we have to introduce the concept of personal identity. Philosophers are interested in this question of what it means for a person to exist across time. The last video, there was somebody who looked like me and sounded like me, and that same person seems to be in front of you. But what does it mean to say that the person who was in that previous video is the same person that I am now? This is the question of personal identity. One of the most popular answers to this question is about psychological continuity, that to exist across time means that you're psychologically connected with yourself across time. So I have memories of making the last video and memories going back even further, and I can also project forward through goals and desires and other things. And that's what makes me, is the psychological continuity of my memories going backwards and my desires and goals and preferences going forwards. This is what it means for a person to exist. William says that in the case where you keep trying different things and you find different things that interest you, over time, if you live long enough, you're just going to become a different person because you're going to forget about those old things that you used to care about. And over time, you will just become somebody else. You will forget who you were in a literal sense, and you'll no longer be the same person. How long will this take? It's an open question, but in a way, it doesn't really matter. Even if it takes 100 or 500 or 1,000 years, if you can no longer remember what your life was like that long ago, then you're somebody else. If you're somebody else, then that means that you're not actually immortal in the sense that we care about. You've become a different person. And so, although it's the same physical body existing across time, you're not the same person anymore. So that's the dilemma. Horn 1 of the dilemma is you'll get bored. Horn 2 of the dilemma is that if you avoid getting bored, eventually you'll become a different person. So now that I've described the arguments, let's go over it and see if they're actually compelling. The boredom argument is, I think, pretty easy to understand, but it's harder to figure out if it's actually right. So there are certain things that I can totally make sense of the claim that I would get bored. If I had to eat the same meal every day, I would get tired of that and I would no longer look forward to eating that meal. And if I had to eat the same meal over time, maybe even once a week or once a month, perhaps over time I would get tired of it and I would want something new. So in those ways, it's not that difficult for me to imagine that we would just get tired of our existence. But some philosophers have pointed out that although that's true of some things, listening to the same song, eating the same meal over and over again, some other goods aren't like that. They renew our interest in them. So if you listen to a song and then put it aside and come back to it next year, then you might get enjoyment out of it once again. Or if you have a favorite movie, even if you've seen that movie a bunch of times and you can remember the dialogue, you can watch it over and over again over a long enough period of time without getting bored of it. So these philosophers say that perhaps there are enough of these renewable goods that over time we could just keep cycling through them. You can think about spending time with your friends or with a romantic partner or reading books. There are so many books in the world and it would take you a really long time to read through them. And then after you read through them once, you could go back and start reading them again. And by that point, you'll probably have forgotten a lot of the details. And you can also do that with all the movies and all the music and all the podcasts and so on and so on. And so it's not actually clear that even over an infinite amount of time that we would genuinely get bored. In order to figure out the personal identity argument, we would have to spend some time trying to figure out if the psychological connectedness theory is correct or if some other theory is correct for personal identity. It makes sense to me that if I don't have any memories of my past self, then I'm not the same person. I think that makes sense. In a practical way, if you think about somebody who has advanced dementia, they can no longer remember who they were previously. They don't recognize their family, and they don't remember the kind of person that they were, the things that they used to like to do. I think it can be correct to say that that person is literally not the same person anymore. Or, to put it another way, that the person who used to be alive no longer exists. There is still a physical body and there is somebody inside, but it's not the same person who used to be alive before. So I think if we were to live forever without changing anything about our brains, after a while we would just forget stuff. And it makes sense to me that over a long enough period of time, we could just forget who we were, become a different person. I think that the boredom argument is a little bit harder to figure out because it's just not obvious to me what it would actually look like to live for so long. The amount of time that we live right now is just not that long. We'll just almost never exhaust all of the things that there are to do. And if we stayed healthy and were able to keep doing things, then I think we could go a really, really long time without getting bored. But the idea that after enough time we'd get bored or just exhaust all of the things that interest us, that is actually not that strange of a claim. So I am about to give a gigantic spoiler to the show The Good Place. So if you don't want to have this spoiler, if you haven't seen the show or you're not up to this point in the show, then you should skip ahead to the end of the video. In the last season of The Good Place, they finally make it to the actual good place. But after a while, all of the people there start to lose interest and they find their lives are boring. So they've done all the things that they want to do, they've tried all the stuff, and it's no longer exciting for them. So the main characters decide to make a way of exiting the good place. Here's how they describe it.
Hi everyone, can I have your attention please? Hi, my name's Eleanor Shellstrop. Hope you're having fun at our Florizona British Library extravaganza. I guess you don't really have fun anywhere, which is the point. It doesn't seem like this is paradise for you. You've basically been on a never-ending vacation, and vacations are only special because they end.
So we have an idea. We're going to set up a new kind of door, somewhere peaceful, so that when you feel happy and satisfied and complete and you want to leave the good place for good, you can just walk through it and your time in the universe will end.
You don't have to go through it if you don't want to, but you can. And hopefully knowing that you don't have to be here forever will help you feel happier while you are.
What will happen when we go through it?
Well, we don't really know exactly. All we know is it will be peaceful and your journey will be over.
You led great lives. You earned your place here. So stay here as long as you like. Use the green doors to see and do every single thing you want to see and do. And when you're ready, walk through one last door and be at peace. Does that sound good?
Seems like they're into it.
I think it's a really interesting question to think about what kinds of things you would want to do if you were in the good place, if you could do anything. And I think it's also an interesting question to think about how long would it take for you to exhaust all of the things, or would you ever get exhausted? But one thing that comes out of watching The Good Place, lots of people have commented on it, but very few people say something like, it's just totally implausible that you would get tired of living in something like The Good Place. The show is really believable. It just makes sense, I think, to a lot of people, to the viewers of the show, that after enough time, you would just run out of things to do. Now, The Good Place's description of it isn't exactly like the one that Bernard Williams gives. Bernard Williams describes that you would get bored, but in The Good Place they describe it as more of kind of a contentment, or you're just fulfilled. So if the premise of The Good Place makes sense, that after enough time we would get bored or we would become fulfilled and wouldn't want to keep going, then this should cause us to assess how we would actually think about wanting to live forever. It would be great, it seems, that if we could live longer than what we do now, but living literally forever might not be as good as it sounds. That brings us back to our original question. Would you want to take the pill? Wait. Where did the pill go? I think my cat ate it. I wonder how he's gonna spend eternity.